Father Paul, thank you for being with us. I learned about you, the ministry in Oceania, from a podcast a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago now, that I listened to, and over time, got more and more involved to the point where my wife Megan and I and our whole family is going to be moving to Fiji, God willing, here even in a couple of months. And I know that you found yourself in a similar position 10, 11 years ago, coming from the States, and maybe not knowing as much about what things were going to be like in the field, but I thought you could share with us about what that experience was like and maybe help me with my own preparations.
I'm very happy that you called me, and I'm happy to be with Father Meletios too. He knows, of course, the story very well. He's still there in New Zealand, and he's been with Yerunda, I think, from the beginning. But Yerunda, I'm saying the word Yerunda, but to your listeners, maybe they don't know what we're referring to. We're referring to His Eminence Metropolitan Amphilochios, who is now serving in the area of Gano and Hora in one of the metropolises of Turkey and Asia Minor of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. But anyway, how wonderful that you remember that podcast or whatever it was, a broadcast. It was very serendipitous. I mean, I didn't have any real understanding of how that interview might work or who it might impact, but we had this opportunity to be on Ancient Faith Radio with Mr. Maddox, and his wife was there also in the studio, and to do an interview about our work in Fiji, and of course also in New Zealand and in Tonga and Samoa. And I think at the end of the interview, I said, perhaps these words I'm offering for you, the listener. I mean, referring to some unique listener. And I never thought, I don't know why I even said that. I'd never done it before in the interview, and I haven't done it since, but it seems that it was the right thing because it spoke to you, and you thought maybe I was talking to you. Yeah, I guess, what can I say? My presbytera, her name is Katarina, my presbytera, well, we had met Metropolitan Amphilochios many years previous at a baptism, where she was the nuna and Yerunda was the head celebrant. He was a priest at the time, and so we did the baptism, and we got to know him a little bit, and then years went by, and Presbytera heard that he had gone to New Zealand. She had an opportunity to attend a wedding of a family member in Australia, so she said to me, I want to visit Archbishop Amphilochios. So it was that was the first step of craziness. I said, okay, because we didn't know anybody there. They didn't have any appointment with anybody. We just sort of threw her over that we didn't have money to pay for the trip, but somehow we found it, and we sent her there. And what should she do? But she, of course, came to New Zealand, and she went to the monastery. I think it had just been purchased in Levin. I think they were still with swamps and mosquitoes and sandflies and all kinds of things. And her first day there, he puts her to work, to help with the planting of the trees. They planted all kinds of fruit trees. I don't know if you were there that day, Father Meletios, because I don't recall her saying that you were there, but you were coming shortly after, or you had been already before, I don't know. But so she saw the monastery in Levin, and she worked with Yerunda, and she met very many wonderful people there in New Zealand, Marina being one of them. And she said, we have to go and help this man. Let's go every summer. We'll go for a month. And so we signed up to go for our first month, which was maybe a year after that. And in the process, every kind of obstacle you can imagine to keep us from going occurred. But somehow to counter every obstacle, God sent another appropriate blessing. I don't want to go into all those details, but it was like pulling my hair out. We ended up having to buy 2 tickets to go for one trip because the changed the dates and the locations, and it was a very challenging thing.
Was it the first time when you went and visit the islands as well? And then,
yes,
and you
in fact, we stopped. I mean, how God works. We arrived in New Zealand of course, they're a day ahead, So we arrived in New Zealand on American Independence Day, and we're greeted by one of the consulate employees there, one of the vice consul or something, who was also our priest in New Zealand at the time, Father Nick Grenius. And he took us to this gathering to celebrate American Independence Day on our first day in New Zealand, which was kind of surreal. And then we had just come from New Mexico, and what should we have to greet us there at this party but the mariachi band that you hear in New Mexico was playing at this gathering place in New Zealand for July 4th. So talk about surreal. But it's kind of, I tell you that story because so much of our life in New Zealand and the mission was like that. The strangest coincidences, the strangest occurrences, and all you could do is say in the end, it must be by Yaronda's prayer, because nothing really made sense, It didn't make sense in any logical human way. So anyway, we met Yaronda in our first meeting with him. He was in Fiji. We had stopped for just a day in New Zealand and flew from there to Fiji. And he was there, his collar unbuttoned, and it was very hot. And so I think he was wearing a hat and still with his andarido. And when the car stopped to pick us up with our luggage, he says, "Bula." And we heard that beautiful greeting, "Bula." Of course, we understood by that point that it meant hello or something like that. And we felt his love. And we said, "Oh, what a beautiful place for us to be." And then from then on, it was every day was like that, kind of miracle after miracle. Father Christodos was there at the time in Fiji, and a friend of ours, John Johns from America, was an attorney. And we went right to work trying to establish the legal standing for the church in Fiji. And it just so happened that we had an attorney with us from America who had done legal work with the Archdiocese to help the Archdiocese reestablish its legal standing with the government. So he had the charter even in his laptop computer.
That was even before Father Bartholomew was ordained.
He wasn't even ordained. He had just been baptized 2 days before I got there, and married the next day on the second day after I got there. Before I got there. And then on the day that we arrived, or rather the morning after we arrived, we did the third liturgy that took place in Fiji of the Greek Orthodox faith. And I was blessed to serve that liturgy. So that's when I first met Father Bartholomew and President Lydia. But all I can say is every day that we worked in mission was a day full of miracles and surprises. And so when you first talked to me, I told you, try not to think too hard about this, Michael, because the more you think about it, the more you're going to convince yourself not to go. It's almost, there's nothing logical about it. But once you go and you follow this certain craziness that we have to adopt in order to do mission work, then you see the grace of God coming. And really, that was Yaronda's first sermon to us when we were in New Zealand. He says, people wonder why they don't see the intervention of God these days. He says, well, where have we even given them a place to work? He says, we have our insurance, we have our pensions, we have our this and our that. He says, what do we need God for? So he says, when you throw yourself at the mercy of God, then you're going to see him act. So with that word, of course, we put aside our pension, we put aside our salaries, we put aside our comfortable life in America. And we said, okay, well, let's see if that's true. But of course, we didn't have to see it. We knew it was going to be true, but we didn't know how. So I guess what I would say to you and to Megan is you're making the right choice to follow your heart and to follow the calling, because God will be with you every step of the way. And you'll see things that amaze you and surprise you and sometimes shock you, but you'll always feel God present with you.
Could we then say that that this is what is missing in the Christian life within this modern world, in order to reach the grace of God, in order to reach, they say that we live the presence of God and the miracles of God in their daily life, that we work more wherever we are on that mission of Christ, on that spreading of the gospel and sharing the faith, coming out from just our small family churches and going toward the other who we make help.
We can make, I agree with you, Father. We can make so many plans of our own. One of the things I think we all should laugh at a little bit. There's a thing in America called life insurance. It's probably all over the world now, but it doesn't insure your life at all. It's a complete misnomer. No matter how much money you pay, you're not going to insure you one more day for your life. But yeah, we all pay into it and we say, okay, I'm insuring my life. But you're not insuring your life. You're just making insurance for after your death. But we don't call it death insurance or after death insurance because I guess nobody would buy it. But the point is, we want to create this somehow a little bit of a fantasy that by paying my insurance, I'm going to live longer, I'm going to live better. I don't know what the exact thought is. But we don't think about our relationship with God in the same way. To say, well, how can I invest in God, in my time with God? And certainly there's a financial aspect. I mean, you'll see, Michael, you had a beautiful, thriving business in Alaska. Now you're going to be going to Fiji, and I'm sure you're not going to be employed in the same way. But God will provide. And sometimes it'll be through somebody that you met in America, and sometimes it'll be through somebody that you know in Fiji.
Do you feel, Father, that you gained when you left your good position in the parish, and really, I mean, the work that you were also doing well there, but also that, security, as you mentioned in America, with the good salary of the priest and support of the big parish. Do you feel that you gained at the end?
Well, it was a challenge the whole way through, but what I gained and what I miss, because I'm now back in America, I lived every day feeling this support of God's grace in almost a tangible way. You knew that He was going to help. You knew that wherever you turned or whoever you met was going to be by God's hand. And I think we lose that a little bit in America. We don't feel it as much. Even though I had that wonderful experience for almost 10 years, I don't know that I feel it as much as here, although I hope to feel it, but I don't always feel it. Here we act, most of our encounters are scheduled. You want to see the priest, you make an appointment. The priest wants to see you, he makes an appointment. Wants to bless your house, he has to make an appointment. Over there, everything was much more dynamic. You met somebody because they happened to show up. My experience in New Zealand with mission was very different from what I experienced in America. In America, people came to the church and they examined it and they thought about it, and you sort of tried to persuade them, hey, Orthodoxy might be a nice thing for you. Think about it this way, think about it that way, answer their questions. And then maybe they'd agree to join you, maybe they wouldn't. In New Zealand, I never had that encounter with anybody. They would come to the church and say, Father, I'd like to convert to Orthodoxy. I'm like, what do you mean? You never even saw you before. You want to convert to Orthodoxy? Well, I've been checking on the internet. I like this faith. I want to join. So it was a very, very different kind of way of living. But so I do miss that.
Or in the islands, even less. They would come to visit the church. They would stay for a service, and they would say, I really feel the difference. I want to join. Huh?
Yeah, I feel so bad that we don't have a priest in Tonga right now. I keep hoping that, who knows, maybe this broadcast will be the one that touches somebody's heart to say, what do you mean? They don't have a priest in Tonga? They have a beautiful church of St. George and there's no priest? Hopefully someone feels moved to go and to tend to those sheep. We had beautiful, beautiful people there who are wanted to be Christians, Orthodox, but no priest now for them. So that.
But what gives us confidence that that is the will of God is it's how everything was starting there. I think you did tell, but maybe Michael doesn't remember about the beginning, the first trip, and when there was no land, and Yeronda came with a certain amount of money, and he said, "Look, this is the money, and we're going to find the land for that amount."
Right, exactly. Everything about our work with Yeronda was, you lived by grace. You had to be, everything was a surprise. Everything was an unknown. When we first arrived in Tonga, he said to me, You were with me, I think, Father Meletios. We arrived and he says, okay, let's pick a hotel. I'm like, yeah, we just flew into Tonga. We haven't prearranged a hotel. We don't know where we're going to stay. No, he said, you pick one. I said, I've never been to Tonga before. How do I know what a good hotel is? He says, you pick one. So I don't think I talked back to him, but certainly those thoughts went through my mind. So I said, well, I guess I'll ask the taxi drivers. They said, we know a good 5-star hotel to take you. I said, I don't think we're 5-star people. So what do you have that's cheaper than that? So they said, and then that's how we met our first two, well, not converts, but our first two contacts in the island of Tonga.
No, but it was similar because you went. I came after a little bit. I stayed behind when you went first with Yeron, and we met Mr. Kisione.
Mr. Kisione, yes.
Know before, and he really helped us in that, and until today.
Yes, and he said they have this much money to spend, and we went to all kinds of different properties, and then finally found one what was considered far out in the boondocks, I guess you'd say, but it turned to be a very nice property, It turned to be the best one, and they built that beautiful church there, St. George. So yeah, you just had to trust him and trust that as he trusted God, you had to trust. And I think in this case, of course, we don't have Yeronda anymore in that active sense, but you do have his prayers and you do have his disciples working there. So I'm sure Father Meletios has a lot of the grace that God gave to Yeronda, he also has to share with you and to guide you. And sometimes maybe to ask you to do something a little seemingly crazy, let's go here. So why are we going over there? I don't know why we're going over there. Let's just go. You don't even know why himself, maybe. But he goes and then something happens and you meet someone. That was one of the stories President told me when she went to New Zealand for the first time. She said, Yeronda was walking through some town and he said, let's stop here and talk to this person. It turned out to be Marina. She was a real estate agent. And they didn't even know it was going to be Marina because she didn't have her last name wasn't Greek on the placard there to give you the clue that she was Greek. But somehow he said, let's stop here. And they met Marina, who was so instrumental in helping them in so many ways to get started in different places. So those kinds of, again, we coined a term, a craziness, a certain craziness, but a certain trusting, childlike trusting to say that everything's going to work out. Don't despair.
On that second trip we took to Tonga, when I brought the group, I remember trying to use craziness as an excuse, like not to go, because you said, you basically told me to get a group of guys together, raise some money and go in like 2 weeks, just out of nowhere, because there was this, the Greek men were there, they were working, they were going to have to leave. I said, I can't do that, Father, you're crazy. And you said, that's the point. Like, if we can't do who would build a church in Tonga in the first place if you weren't a little crazy? That's what you told me. It's like, I didn't really have an argument against that. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do it. If that's how you guys, that's how it goes. You either participate.
Well, the amazing thing is you pulled it off. You got a whole team together in 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, it all worked out amazingly well, but it was kind of crazy.
And the team you put together was tremendous. I mean, and I think many of them are still wanting to be involved even today. I know Father Henker is still hoping to be involved.
And Miles is just waiting to come. As soon as I get there, as soon as we get over there, he's just waiting for the call. So. And
then the other thing that's so unusual is that some of the people that I met in New Zealand have stayed in touch with me, but really not so much in touch with me. They want to stay in touch with New Zealand. They would come through. I met them at the church in Auckland, and they want to stay. One of them was a young lady, you know her by name. I'm not going to mention her name. It was a Maori woman, and she was living. I don't know how she even found me, but she suddenly started emailing me and asked me questions about Orthodoxy, and now she's an Orthodox Christian, and she, was baptized and serving the church in a beautiful way.
Yeah, there's your parish growing even more after that. Many young people are coming in a similar way, as you said just before, in search for the truth, in search for the deep spiritual way of life. And it's quite amazing. We need more workers on the field, as it is always. God is doing his part, and we need to have hope that the things will fall in its place. I'm just thinking of the words that you're saying is, and thinking of some people who are now preparing, as the borders are slowly open, preparing to come and to help. That there is that need in us, and also the joy that we definitely receive when we are involved with that work of the church, that work of the that we live within the church as place, as how to call it, the factory of salvation. Something there we need to click. I think, as Michael said, that without that thing that appears as craziness, we cannot reach that state. So I'm not sure, Michael, what you think, like about this, especially like you're involving now the whole family. Your good wife didn't come to Ireland, didn't see, but through you did feel that that's the right thing. But and now speaking recently with people who are supporting the work that you're doing, how do you see how the people in the church perceive this craziness?
For the most part, people are very inspired and very excited, partly to hear about all the work that's been done already and that we're going to go. We, when we took that last trip, it was right before COVID happened. We came home planning to go back with Megan, and then we couldn't go for a site visit so she could even see to make the decision. And as this has gone, now it's almost 2 years later, and we just had to decide either we're going to just go sight unseen or not at all. So we've never traveled internationally together anywhere. This will be our first trip, is moving to the South Pacific, our first trip together. But when people hear about it, and I think there's a combination of the work that's already happened there, and then, and everything that ΙΕΡΑΠΟΣΤΟΛΗ Amphilochios did, and then us kind of our story of hearing Father Paul's that podcast interview, and then deciding, moving towards that step of actually taking our whole family there. Because it's so different, people find it exciting. I think I had a friend of mine who's a priest said, look, if you were going to seminary and you were going to go somewhere and be a priest, everybody would say, okay, well, good, that's nice. I mean, that's a thing that people do, but nobody does what you're doing. Like, nobody just ups and leaves their home and goes and lives in a foreign country. It's not that nobody does it, right? But it's much less common, and it's not sort of become one of the usual options for an Orthodox Christian family to do, is to move internationally and participate in missions like this. But I think even though that's not maybe a common thing, I see a lot of people who are very, very excited about it. And it doesn't mean that they're all going to do it, but I think knowing that that is one of the things that even a family can do is very exciting. I come from a group of people who became Orthodox altogether when I was just a child. My parents were part of that group. And so a lot of these people are older, and maybe their ministry, I think, was entering the church at all and becoming Orthodox and making that big of a change. But to see sort of a newer generation coming in and taking a step, now we've established our home parishes, and now we're moving out into the world. I think a lot of people are very excited about that. So we've been pretty overwhelmed with all the support that we've gotten from people who really are behind us, helping us fund the trip, but also really just want to be a part of things moving forward, and people who want to come and visit. It's sometimes almost overwhelming, but we definitely don't feel alone in this whole process.
Well, I want to tell you a strange story from Tonga. I mean, I think it's strange. One of the days when I was there by myself, that is to say, of the New Zealand clergy. I was the only one there. You know, we hadn't yet finished the church. We hadn't come very far. And the man comes up and with his wife, and he drives up, and he pops the trunk. And he says, "I've got some stained glass windows I think you'd like to buy." I'm like, "Do I even want stained glass windows anymore? What are you talking about?" So he pops the trunk. I look in there, and I see these windows, and I thought, well, those look actually like they could look good in an Orthodox church. They're nice, you know. And they had rose. It was a beautiful red rose in them. I thought they're kind of pretty. So now I think, well, would they even fit? You know, I mean, okay, they're pretty, but can we use them at all? So then we somehow, I think it was Sophronios, we stuck him to go up and actually try and see if they fit into the space in the dome of the church. Well, wouldn't you know, they fit. But then we said, well, how many do you have? And I don't even know how many windows. Was it 8 or was it 6? I don't even know. But we had just enough. He had just enough. We bought the whole set. I thought, he says, well, I said, where do you get these from? I said, well, I just, you know, I got them from somebody. In other words, he wasn't like manufacturing. He picked them up from somebody else and tried to resell them. So this was going to be the one and only set of stained glass windows. And they had exactly 8, which is how many we needed. They had exactly the size and shape of the windows that we needed to go in. And you think, who arranged that? I mean, like if you had ordered it on the internet and said, I want exactly this shape, it would have come out wrong. Somebody would have made a mistake and you wouldn't have got the right one. These we didn't order at all. They came exactly the shape that we needed and exactly the colors that we liked and fit perfectly. And I thought, how does that happen?
And to make it even more funnier, the shape of the windows were mistakenly different than those that we designed on the paper.
Oh, you're serious? That's even funnier. That's even funnier. In other words, if we had sent in the measurements that we actually designed, that we would have gotten the wrong windows. Unbelievable. And then, Michael, you hadn't put them in. I mean, those are absurd thoughts. And I only, if someone else may say, well, what's the big deal? We got some windows. But when you see how hard it is to come by anything in Tonga, any kind of building material, and you happen to get somebody drive right up to your door, pop their trunk, and they're handing you these things, they don't even know you. I mean, if you had is in the hand of God, I mean, what is this?
Yes,
So,
I mean the whole stages. I mean the whole project is full of stages of miracles and things that are similar to that. Like even if you think, when we came to that stage when we couldn't move on, the crew who started the building, they couldn't proceed with the ceilings, which I mean, even they encouraged us that we should do it in concrete and we should do this curved ceiling and the dome. And then, you know, from nowhere in Samoa, we're meeting a Greek man who is a builder himself, and is really willing to come and to do this work. And he's going back to Greece and then traveling with his friend, staying a few months and finishing that job.
And here, again, people we hardly knew, and they made such a good impression on the Tongans. You know, their behavior, their kindness, their generosity of spirit. Wonderful, wonderful thing.
A few months ago, Megan was doing a training for this catechesis program that a woman in our church who became Orthodox after being Catholic took this. It's a Montessori based, it's called Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And she, over the last 10 years, has been sort of recreating it in an Orthodox way with the assistance of our priest here and other people. And so she's become quite the expert on this catechesis from an Orthodox perspective. And so Megan was doing the level 1 training so that she would have, you know, something to bring to Fiji with us to share. Whether or not we actually institute the whole program, you know, we didn't know, but at least she has this skill set, right? And so in the meantime, Father Meletios had been trying to get me to talk to Eleni in Australia, who we hadn't spoken with yet, but she wanted to come and start a school. And so we're trying to coordinate, and we were going to do it the same week that Megan was doing the training. I said, oh, she can't do it because she's in this catechesis training. And Eleni responded, oh, I just did that with 6 people in our church because I wanted to implement this catechesis program in Fiji. Do you know this lady, Shelley Finkler? And it's like, she's our daughter's godmother. Like, of course we know her. Like that's been in process for over a year, like before we ever heard of Eleni or even thought of moving to Fiji. Those little things, they may or may not seem big to somebody hearing the story, but when it happens to you, if you have eyes to see it, there's no way this could have been an accident. And when you experience it, you know that in a special kind of a way. It's not just neat or interesting or what a coincidence, like God really sowing something or confirming something in us. And so those little moments have meant, that one in particular, but other things like that have meant a lot to us throughout this process.
Yes, it seems that God is making that network invisibly around us, and as Father Paul was saying, like if we respond in time, we start seeing it and feeling it. If we miss it, we might still wondering, where is it? Is it, you know, am I outside of the grace of God? Am I outside of His providence?
Well, I think I want to add to our discussion here, just because people listening from outside might not understand. We really, really, really work with the people in the islands. We don't come as, you know, the Great White Hope or something, some visitor from afar coming to grace the benighted natives or something. We have this idea that God is sending us, but we also know that God is reaching out to them at the same time. And when whoever we encounter, we find this, you know, openness of heart and a willingness to help us and work with us. And we've met so many wonderful people, and we couldn't have done anything without the help of the native indigenous people. All the things we accomplished there with their help. And of course, you see that even the best in Fiji, because all of our clergy are indigenous clergy, all of our nuns are indigenous people. And of course, all the people that are members of our church are indigenous. So it's really their church. We're just trying to help and assist them to get it going. And maybe people who are involved in missions and other churches wouldn't know that about us, but that's really how it is going on. We're not establishing up some sort of an ethnic colony of some sort. We're just reaching out to the people in love, and in that love, God is working His miracles.
And as you said, that we also reflect on that, how much we received in that act of giving, or as you said, you know, supporting, that we actually felt also supported. And
even, you know, I was thinking about one of the days when we were in Samoa, and people brought us, you know, coconuts, and they said, "Oh, you look thirsty." Or people brought us things from their own gardens and their own trees, and they fed us. You know, it wasn't just us, you know, feeding them or something. There was a mutuality about it. It was so lovely. I remember one time the fellow brought to us a basket of fruit, and I thought, where did they buy this beautiful basket? Well, they didn't buy the beautiful basket. They made the beautiful basket with their own hands. It was gorgeous, woven basket, you know, with palm leaves, I guess it was, and filled with all this fruit. I thought, what, you know, gorgeous. But it was from their own love, you know, and they sustained us, and hopefully we sustained them too. And in some mystery known to God, we work together for the kingdom. But it is a very loving place to be when you're serving Christ in that way, because you really do, in depending on Christ, you put aside so many obstacles, even in your own mind, you know, whether it be prejudices or preconceptions or preconditions or whatever they might be. You just come to be with a person, and they come to be with you, and Christ is there in the middle of you, in the midst of you, I guess you could say.
yes, in that encounters, we all meet Christ, the one who is receiving and the one who is giving in the same time happening. That while we are giving something, we are also receiving, as you said.
Yeronda took Yeronis Melani, someone who had been Orthodox for a year or two, and then he sent her to a monastery for another year and a half, maybe 2 years, to be trained, and then she's made an abbess. Someone else will say, what were you doing? Why would you make someone an abbess who has so little knowledge of the faith? And then all you have to do to say to them is come and see her. Come and see how she behaves. Come and see how she follows the faith. Come and see how she treats the children. Come and see how she manages the monastery and the orphanage. And then you tell me that we make the wrong decision, that we act too soon. And obviously we didn't. I mean, she's just perfect for that. And that's another testimony to God's grace. And that really is just his work, not our work. St. Paul was so ill and so many times injured, but he had many, many new converts caring for him. One of them was St. Luke, his physician. You know, is that a nothing? You know, should we say, oh, you know, he should have picked somebody who was a seasoned Christian? Oh, there weren't any seasoned Christians. He picked Luke, and Luke became the great evangelist, became the great writer of the book of Acts, and he learned so many things at the foot of Paul, caring for his wounds. So, I mean, you could say, well, why did God give him those wounds? Paul had so many more things to have done. So many people could have taught, but he taught also through his weakness, right?
It seems with the ΙΕΡΑΠΟΣΤΟΛΗ, with that the sacred mission, we do enter into the very heart of the gospel.
It's a beautiful thing. It's overwhelming, but it's incredibly beautiful. I wish for other people that feel the same joy. So I don't know who we're speaking to here, who's going to listen to this recording, but if you're out there and you want help, we need you. Come
And see.
See for yourself. And Michael, don't worry. I know you haven't been there yet, but in some ways you've been there already because your heart has been there.
I've spent about 6 hours in Fiji. That's it. We're moving there after a 6-hour visit. But I think Megan and I both really have that sense that we have a lot to learn from them, from the people we're going to go be with. We have a certain thing to give, which is for Megan and me, more as much as anything, it's just the fact that we grew up in the church and that we're both really drawn to living in a part of a community. That's always been the focus of our life, the biggest part of the picture. But I think a lot in terms of just the way that people live in the South Pacific and the way that their culture has figured out how to work together for their own, you know, mutual benefit, and their emphasis on family and being together. And it doesn't make it perfect. They have their own difficulties like anybody else because we're all just people, but that all together, you know, if we're sort of all leaning on each other, we can, like I said, encounter Christ and grow together. It's just somehow God has picked us to go be with them. We feel like it must be what we need, not what we have to give exactly, but also what we need for our own salvation, for our own benefit.
Yeah, that's probably the deepest part of the mystery. I wouldn't know how to even describe it. Certainly my need, is it God's need? I don't know. I mean, I assume it is. Somehow it's God's need because he called me to do it or he asked me to do it. But I suppose if I hadn't done it, he would have found somebody else.
Sure.
So
yeah,
that's a mystery too deep for me to express. But there's certainly a co-working between God and man at that moment, and a tremendous respect of God for man, which is maybe something we don't expect. But you know, he wants us to be involved. He could preach to the rocks and the trees. He told the Pharisees the rocks could open their mouths and speak. But he wants to involve us in his plan for salvation by way of sharing. You know, I don't know if we always understand that, but he's nice. He doesn't want to take all the blessings for himself. He wants to share them. So imagine that. You know, I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this call, and we miss you from. I'm here in faraway Michigan, but our hearts are close by you. And I do hope to visit again. It would, of course, be for a shorter visit, but I'd like to come.
Keep us in your prayers, Father.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Thank you for including me in this beautiful opportunity.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Michael.
thank you, Father. Alrighty. Bye-bye.